Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about The Girl in the Tower Part 4. This is the story of Gypsy Rose Blanchard.
My mom had gave me this little glass house, and she said, one day this will be real. And now it finally is.
The video you just watched was a newsreel that was aired right after building Claudine and Gypsy's home in October of 2005. And this will be built by a fundraiser organization known by Habitat for Humanity. And the other thing that I kind of wanted to stress in this newsreel that you're watching, where Gypsy is more or less going over in the interview and talking about what they had added in the house, and that the building of the house was like a dream come true. And if you really notice in the video, you can see Claudine clutching Gypsy's hand, and this was more of an intimidation tactic for Claudine. What she would do is she would hold Gypsy's hand it may have seemed like she was being a doting mother on the television to the naked eye, but what was really going on was this was her way of saying, I'm watching every move you make. I'm watching what you're getting ready to say. Gypsy would say in a later interview that if she began talking and going over different things, and her mom was afraid that she was going to say something that was going to show the world that what was really going on, she would actually squeeze her hand, and Gypsy knew at that point was to zip it. Another thing that I wanted to add that we had talked about was that Claudine had gone around and told people that Gypsy was actually 12 years old. And a lot of people who were around Gypsy really couldn't tell the difference, because she was very small frame and she had a very high voice, and her frame was due to partially being extremely malnourished, because Claudine would only feed her baby formula through the feeding tube that she had, which would kind of give her very small frame. But in reality, she was about 17 years old. This picture was actually taken in Disney World of Gypsy, and in the photograph she is wearing like this kind of princess costume, and we will later talk about this Disney trip here in a minute, but I just wanted to show this picture. Around this time, people had thought that Gypsy was about 16 or 17, but in actuality, Gypsy was actually 22 when this picture was taken. So just to kind of give you an idea of just how malnourished Claudine had made Gypsy, just to make her seem like she was a lot younger than she actually was. When Gypsy would turn 15, she would actually run into a piece of paper in her mom's room. And this piece of paper actually had her actual birth date on the paper. And she would bring it to Claudine's attention and say, why does it say my birthday is on July 27th, 1991? And Claudine would say, oh, that's just a typo. Here's your actual birth certificate, and show the more or less forged birth certificate that she had made after Hurricane Katrina, which, if you remember, she had told people that she lost all of her medical records when Hurricane Katrina hit them, but yet she was able to find her actual birth certificate. So there's no telling how factual the hurricane story was actual true. But we do know that their home was lost, but I don't think Claudine lost as much stuff as she had claimed to other people. But the statement that Claudine had told Gypsy was already too late. It had actually started planting a lot of seeds of doubt in Gypsy's head, and this would be something that would play a major role later on in the future. The Disney trip that I've been showing in this video would actually be paid for by Make-A-Wish Foundation, to where Claudine and Gypsy would go into Disney. Being that Gypsy was very heavily influenced by Disney princesses, and you would see later on that the princess's lifestyle just had a big impact on Gypsy's life. She would later say in an interview that she loved hearing about fairy tales, but the difference between fairy tales and reality is reality's a lot more darker and grimmer than fairy tales are. And because of their semi-celebrity status, they would be invited to many other events, such as movie premieres and special need organizations, etc., to where Gypsy would meet a variety of different friends besides the friends that she had that she lived near that would be neighbors. And wherever she went, Claudine was not far behind to keep a close eye on her, to make sure that she was keeping her mouth shut about what was really going on. In 2011, Gypsy would start using her phone and computer and start going on to social media platforms as a way to keep in contact with friends she had met all over the world, and to stay in contact with her friend that was also a neighbor at the same time. Around this time, she began talking to a guy and reconnecting with a guy she had met at a sci-fi convention, and there she would begin confiding in him about how her mother really was, how domineering she was, how she questioned her age, and so forth. And I believe this would be the first time Gypsy began talking about what Claudine was making her lie about. And her friend would actually tell her to go pack her bags and come live with him, and she would be safe. Gypsy would actually pack her bags and sneak out of the house that night, and would actually hitchhike a ride to her friend's house. But this living situation would actually be short-lived. She wouldn't even be there a day, because the guy that she had messaged that had offered for her to come live there was actually mutual friends of Claudine. And Claudine, when she realized Gypsy was gone, would actually find her within 4 hours. It is said that Claudine would actually pull up to the guy's house very angrily and would begin screaming at him, waving the forged birth certificate that she had made up, and had told the man that she was still 16, she would show this to police, and he would be arrested. So the man actually stood down, and there Claudine would take Gypsy home. But it didn't end there. Gypsy would say when they got home, Claudine would take a hammer and began destroying her computer and phone with the hammer. And she would turn around and look at Gypsy and say, "If you ever do this again, I'll beat the hammer over your fingers." She would then go take a dog leash and handcuffs and then tie Gypsy to the bed and leave her that way for about 2 weeks. While this was going on, she would board up all the windows to where she couldn't look out, people could not look in, and her actual neighbor that was around her age, she went over and screamed and cussed at them for corrupting her innocent daughter. Gypsy would say at this time that she knew that she could not escape her mother, and she more or less felt like a little blue bird in a cage that was just wanting to leave the nest. She would also go and say in another interview that for this very type of way of how she was being treated is why she really identified with Rapunzel from the movie Tangled. And she would just talk about how this evil mother would keep her locked up in this tower. And essentially that is how Gypsy was made to feel while living with Claudine, that she just more or less felt like this girl in the tower that was pretty much a prisoner from her domineering mother.